The judge in the Roger Stone case is denying his request for a sentencing delay, despite President Trump's calls for her to do so. Stone's lawyers demanded that Judge Amy Berman Jackson give him a new trial, but she's denied his previous requests. Stone will still be sentenced this Thursday. Jackson has become a frequent target of President Trump. And this all comes as the president refuses to heed Attorney General William Barr's request to stop publicly discussing Justice Department matters. President Trump says that the trial of his former campaign advisor was unfair. As this is happening, an organization of 1,100 federal judges is criticizing Barr for his handling of the case. Barr intervened to lessen Stone's initial recommended sentence of up to 9 years. The 4 federal prosecutors on the case then resigned in protest. More than 2,000 former DOJ employees have signed a letter calling on Barr to resign. The latest on Stone comes as we're hearing more from John Bolton for the first time since the president's impeachment trial. At an appearance at Duke University, the former national security advisor claimed that the White House is trying to suppress his forthcoming book, accusing it of censorship. Bolton also suggested that he was concerned about the threat of legal action from the Trump administration. Let's bring in CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, let's start with Bolton. Did he provide any other answers to questions about the president's conduct or about why he chose not to participate in the impeachment trial?
You know, he's being really careful here because, again, his ultimate goal is to sell that book, right? And he is in this tug of war right now with the White House as the National Security Council continues to review the contents to make sure that everything in it, if published, would not jeopardize national security. In fact, we just heard from the White House press shop today responding to Bolton's claim that he is being censored. And the White House says, you know, this is a very normal review process, and we would go through it for any manuscript for that very reason, to make sure national security was not jeopardized. But Bolton is certainly still teasing the fact that he has a lot of information, which is no surprise. I mean, he was, after all, the national security advisor. What I think is interesting is that he continues to be bold about criticizing President Trump in other matters. For example, on North Korea policy, he says it was always doomed to fail, and the president's approach was simply wrong. You know, he also said that in terms of that call with the Ukrainian president, he was asked whether it was perfect, like Mr. Trump characterizes, and all he said was, "You would love chapter 14, I think he said. So basically, he's leaving little crumbs, but he's being careful because he can't really talk about these matters publicly. Because the content is under review.
Yeah, quite a little tease there. So let's turn now to the Roger Stone case. We saw Judge Jackson's decision not to delay Stone's sentencing, and we know that the president is still tweeting about the case, even though his attorney general urged him publicly not to do so. Is this latest move likely to draw further anger from the president, or is he just going to continue doing what he's doing?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to stop tweeting anytime soon, because certainly this is not the first time the Attorney General expressed frustrations over his presidential tweets. And Barr is definitely not alone. I mean, in the past, his top advisors, people close to him, have tried to tamp down the president's posting of messages, especially with regard to information that has to do with ongoing criminal investigations or foreign policy decisions. But at the end of the day, they also say Trump is Trump and he's going to do whatever he wants. So with regard to expressing frustration about the Roger Stone case, I think we can expect more of that. He tweeted today something similar that he's already said before, which is that he believes the foreperson in the Stone case is biased against him, the president, and that's why Stone deserves another shot. But as you mentioned, that's not likely going to happen, and the sentencing is still on for Thursday.
Now, how are the president's attorneys, such as White House counsel Pat Cipollone, approaching this post-impeachment purge, the continued tweeting? Any guidance on that?
You know, I think, as we've just talked about, they really can't control what the president does. And in some ways, now, he's bulletproof. I mean, he was impeached, and he was not removed from office. And so I think the president feels emboldened, and we know that he is still really angry that he was impeached at all. And we know that he is on a tear, and he is going to use this all the way up until Election Day to his advantage. And, one thing that the campaign has said from day one is that they believe impeachment will actually help the president. So how does the president get his message out there about how he was wronged and how he was the victim? Of course, it was Twitter. And so, he is well aware that every tweet is a permanent record of what he says as president, and from day one he has said and posted whatever he wants. So I don't expect any change in that behavior, despite what advice he might be getting from his top lawyers, his top advisors, really anybody.
His attorney general, who said it was impossible for him to actually do his job as long as the president was tweeting. And right away, we saw the president follow up with more tweets that have now continued. So I'm wondering, is there any chance that Attorney General Barr might choose to leave the office in protest like so many of his other prosecutors have done? Or are you hearing anything from your sources at the Justice Department as all these former officials are calling on William Barr to resign? Are they still confident in the Attorney General? Is there any possibility that the Attorney General will lose confidence in the president since he continues to make his job, as he says, impossible?
President Trump overall, we have learned, is happy with the Attorney General's performance. And it doesn't seem like Barr is going anywhere anytime soon, even though we've also learned through our sources that there is tension between him and the rank and file in the Justice Department because he repeatedly challenges the work of the people who do this as a career prosecutors who decide, their sentencing recommendations, who decide, how to move forward in a case. Here you have Barr, who, arguably is making decisions to intervene based on what the president wants. Of course, that's what critics say. He has denied that many, many times and says he is not influenced at all with what President Trump says or does. But what we'll have to look for moving forward is just how far these current employees, these current staff members are willing to go in their protest against Barr's actions against them. So, they could stage a walkout, for example, but so far we're not getting any indication that that's going to happen, despite the growing number of former officials who are calling for his resignation, despite that group of federal judges that you mentioned just a few minutes ago who are having an emergency meeting to talk about Barr's behavior. So right now, I think it's something we have to monitor because it's clear that that tension is still ticking up, but as far as how that would translate into real action is to be determined. All that to say, so far, it doesn't seem like Barr is going anywhere.
One more thing before we let you go, Weijia. The president seemed to get a little hot under the collar after former President Obama sent a tweet commemorating the 11th anniversary of the Recovery Act, which Obama said paved the way for more than a decade of economic growth and the longest streak of job creation in American history. And President Trump then accused President Obama of trying to take credit for the economic boom. Why is he going on the offensive?
Look, the economy is his number one issue as he looks for a way to stay here at the White House. Whether you talk to campaign officials or White House officials, at the end of the day, they always go back to the economy. So, they'll say, despite how the president acts, despite the words he chooses to use that everyone might not like, despite his foreign policy decisions, even domestic ones that impact millions and millions of Americans every day, what matters to everyone at the end of the day, according to his supporters, is the economy, and it is strong right now. But the problem is that he takes full credit for it, right? And President Obama should receive a lot of credit because the economy started to grow while he was in office after measures that he took. And so, there are definitely both sides jumping into this, depending on who they support politically. You have the president's supporters saying, of course it's because of this decisions that the president has made, for example, to bring back more jobs in manufacturing. But others will say, look, this growth is not all of a sudden. It's something that has happened over the course of over a decade, pointing to what President Obama did. And so there's no way that Mr. Trump is going to stop fighting and stop making the case that he is solely responsible, again, because that is his number one issue and the reason he really believes he's going to remain the president in 2020.
Weijia Jiang, thank you.
Sure.